Good morning, everyone. It's Lee Henson, President and Founder of Agile Dad, and it's time for today's episode of the Daily Stand-Up. So without any further ado, let's get started. Today I wanted to talk to you about the concept of an Agile Spike. Is there such a thing as a spike in Agile? What is a spike? How does it impact us? And how do we treat it, or what do we do? So for those of you who are familiar with extreme programming, developers often encounter spikes where it requires some additional research or some additional guidance in order for us to figure out what we need to do. So it was something that we ran into that was unexpected or not anticipated, or maybe it was anticipated, but we just need to do some additional research to figure out where we are and what we can do differently, yes? So if that is true, then by definition, and I looked this up online, so here's the definition of a spike. A spike is a research or experiment that provides development teams the ability to evaluate the functional increment and provide them the unfamiliar essentials necessary for them to make key decisions regarding gathering of information about complex stories and how they would pursue completing those. I love it. So I thought we'd dig a little deeper and talk about when a spike should be used or could be used. When there's uncertainties or risk is definitely a time when you want to do this. If a story is too large or too complex, you want to make sure you break it out. Sometimes you'll do spikes there. If there's a necessity to break down a story into smaller pieces, sometimes you'll put in a spike to do that. And sometimes it's just, when you're in that research mode where you're trying to build out the MVP, that's a good place for a spike. Now, spikes do exist, but a spike is very similar to a backlog item. In fact, you'll often hear me say that a backlog item is a backlog item, right? And there's several different types of backlog items. You've got defect backlog items, you've got research backlog items, you've got spike backlog items, you've got innovation backlog items. So the point I'm trying to make is that I don't want you to get hung up over the term spike, right? We can call it whatever we'd like, but the spike literally is a type of backlog item. It means that we are going to dedicate a time-boxed amount of time. Now, that's incredibly important. Never, ever, ever, under any circumstance, ever allow for a spike to go not time-boxed. Because what happens when you do that is development says, oh, yeah, we're still looking at it. We're still looking at it. You can have a spike that goes on for 3 or 4 sprints. You want to make sure that you time-box it and say, whatever information you come back with in the next 2 hours or the next 2 days, that's the right amount of information. So the spike is going to help us really get our head around how much information or how long we should be spending doing this, so that we can make sure we're spending the right amount of time to get the right amount of information. So that's important. Now, as far as types of spikes are concerned, in general, I only see like 2 different types of spikes. You've got what I call a technical spike or a research or functional spike, right? Technical spikes are used to determine how to build something, or determining bandwidth for something you're trying to do, or a push or pull set of terms, or whatever the case may be. The point is there's a lot of different ways to leverage it, but technical spikes are usually the ones that are pretty much more straightforward. We just need to figure out how to solve a problem. A functional spike, right, might be, how do I break down an epic into smaller stories? Or how do I make a user story more simple and break it down from complex parts? Or how do I set up a period to research for risks or uncertainties around an item if there's a threshold for risk, right? So I think that there's the concept of evaluation for prototypes, for proof of concepts, for wireframes, for anything to create an MVP, right? And those are all different types of spikes. So I think the key that you need to keep in mind to be successful with spikes is that 1, they have to be time boxed. We don't want to spend forever doing a spike. We have to have a time box. 2, we have to put some type of effort limit on it. We can say we don't want to spend more effort doing this than we do doing that, right? And sometimes you can put an effort score or whatever you want to put on it. You just don't want to spend more time doing one than the other. And sometimes people use story points and leverage that to do this. 3, you want to have a budgetary limit. Sometimes you don't want to spend more than this amount of money trying to figure that out. And that's how much money you have to spend. So sometimes that could be their criteria. I don't want to use more than $50 to solve this problem. Well, then that's what you got. And then finally, we want to either evaluate and come up with the 3 best possibilities. So you can set a possibility limit. You can say, I want to know the top 5 ways we can do this, or the top 1 way we can do this. So oftentimes you'll do that, and that's another good way to set a threshold around a spike. The key is that You want to put limitations on the spike so that people can have actionable deliverables so that we can focus on outcome and not output. I hope that was helpful for you. I know it was helpful for me when I first read about it. So even though it's not part of the core Agile framework, I think that spiking is important. And I think it's something that we do naturally anyway. So if you have a topic that you want to talk about or something you want us to cover, feel free to reach out, lee@agiledad.com. I'd love to hear your topic specifically so that I can make sure that if it's an article you want to cover, that I can cover it for you and we can talk about it here on the Daily Stand-Up Podcast. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.